one of the joys of this job used to be wondering what the new day, no plug intended, would bring. Not anymore. Now it's watching headlines like these pop up, quote, "Here's why you should be worried about U.S. democracy right now." That's from CNN.com political analyst Zach Wolf, and yeah, it's a thing.
The ding-dongs who sacked the Capitol last year, that was like when Al-Qaeda tried to take down the World Trade Center the first time with a van. It was a joke. But the next time they came back with planes.
Bill Maher misspoke there about the date. The attack on the Capitol was this year. As for the rest, the notion that what the former president incited in January was only a dress rehearsal, well, listen to someone who does serious for a living. Yesterday on CBS News, former National Security Council senior official Fiona Hill was asked about Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley's quote in Bob Woodward and Robert Costa's new book, Peril, comparing January 6 to, quote, the great dress rehearsal. Her answer is chilling.
You're a Russia analyst. You know
Exactly.
immediately what that phrase is, which is what Lenin called an uprising that preceded the revolution. I read that and I said, dear God.
Yeah.
I mean, the general is saying that this is a precursor potentially to further violence. I mean, is this overstating things in a historical sense?
He's not overstating it at all because, I mean, we all saw in real time what happened on January 6th at the Capitol building. I mean, this is exactly the thing that you think of historically in revolutions, storming the Bastille during the French Revolution, storming the Winter Palace during the Russian Revolution that General Milley was alluding to. And as he was saying, we've seen many historical episodes where there is violence, people discount it, they think that this is just a passing occurrence.
Just a passing occurrence? You mean like Mike Pence, the one rioters wanted to lynch, calling it, quote, one day in January, that kind of thing? Well, if that were all it was, it would be bad enough and destructive enough to the truth which any healthy democracy rests on. But it's not just rewriting the history of one day. It's rewriting the history of another, Election Day 2020. Here's a member of the House Republican leadership doing it over the weekend when asked if he thought the election was stolen.
Well, Chris, I've been very clear from the beginning. If you look at a number of states, they didn't follow their state-passed laws that govern the election for president. That is what the United States Constitution says. They don't say that the states determine what the rules are. They say the state legislatures determine the rules.
But the states all
in a number of
certified.
States, they didn't follow those state legislative.
The states all
they didn't follow
certified.
those legislative rules. Right, but at the end of the day, are we going to follow what the Constitution says or not? I hope we get back to what the Constitution says, but clearly in a number of states, they didn't follow those legislatively set
So you think
rules.
the election was stolen?
What I said is there are states that didn't follow their legislatively set rules. That's what the United States Constitution says.
Do you think the election was stolen?
Yeah. And it's not just irregular. It's states that did not follow the laws set, which the Constitution says they're supposed to follow. When you see states like Georgia cleaning up some of the mess and people calling that Jim Crow law, that's a flat-out lie.
He simply could not say what election officials in 50 states certified and 60-some-odd court cases reaffirmed. But it's not just rewriting the history of that day either. Here's Senator Chuck Grassley, who certainly knows better, trying to rewrite January 3rd. That's the day, according to testimony from someone in the room, the former president discussed decapitating the Justice Department and appointing as Attorney General someone who would support his demands as he tried to overturn the election.
That was the advice that one person in the Justice Department was suggesting, but just one person, and he rejected all that. And they're trying to make it a scenario that he was trying to get the Justice Department.
Yes, that's the same Senator Grassley who is running for re-election and who stood on stage Saturday with the man he once said, and I'm quoting from his statement here, quote, displayed poor leadership in his words and actions, unquote. He said on the 13th of February, and before that on January 7th, a day after the insurrection. So another 2 days rewritten. But it takes more to create the danger of a political uprising than just the wholesale creation of an alternate myth to explain a defeat, as Confederate states did with the Lost Cause, or Nazis claim that the betrayal from within was the reason Germany lost the First World War. It also takes some to rally behind, which is why this program tries to play the ramblings of the former president sparingly, if at all. But in this case, because he is the man whom Republicans like Chuck Grassley, Mike Pence, Steve Scalise, and all but a few lawmakers have chosen to supplicate themselves to, here's a sampling of what he said in Iowa this weekend.
I'm telling you, the single biggest issue, as bad as the border is, it's horrible. Horrible what they're doing. They're destroying our country. As bad as that is, the single biggest issue, the issue that gets the most pull, the most respect, the biggest cheers, is talking about the election fraud of 2020 presidential election. The Justice Department was scared or impotent. They didn't want to do anything about it. As the Supreme Court refused to hear the case by Texas and almost 20 other states, they rule against me all the time. All the time, very personal rulings. It's been going on for years, but never like this. This, again, they used COVID in order to cheat with all of these ballots and all of this early voting and late voting. We are one movement, one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. And together, we will make America powerful again.
The former president this weekend. Also here trying yet again to turn a member of a violent insurrectionist mob into a hero.
It's my great honor to address each of you gathered today to cherish the memory of Ashley Babbitt, a truly incredible person. There was no reason Ashley should have lost her life that day.
Just to remind you, Ashley Babbitt was a woman who fell under the sway of the QAnon conspiracy, then incited by the former president's rally that day, was part of a violent mob that broke into the Capitol. The mob beat and wounded 140 police officers and wanted to lynch the vice president. She was shot and killed trying to break into a secure hallway with fleeing Congress members just steps away. And now those very same Republican lawmakers, with only a few rare exceptions, are hitching their wagons to the man and the idea responsible for the worst act of political violence since the Civil War. And in red states across the country, at the former president's prompting, state legislatures are imposing new laws, making elections tougher to vote in, but easier for partisan forces to challenge. Also at the former president's urgings, Republicans have begun replacing nonpartisan local election officials, including Republicans, with Trump loyalists. Each day seems to bring another headline. None seems to bring any joy. Joining us now, two CNN political commentators, both of them conservatives, Mike Shields, who advises House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, and S.E. Cupp. S.E. Congressman Scalise and Senator Grassley, who, as we noted, knows better. They're leaders in the Republican party. Scalise is perpetuating the big lie, and Grassley is kind of coming up with this new lie that Trump was somehow the victim in the insurrection. What does this do to the party, and what does this do to the country?
Well, it's an embarrassment to the country to watch two grown men so emasculated, so afraid of losing Donald Trump's support and supporters, and unable to say what we all know to be true. It's deeply disappointing, but I actually think it's worse. In some ways, people like Steve Scalise, lawmakers like Chuck Grassley, leaning into this and really giving it their full weight is, I think, worse than Trump doing it. The idea that Trump lies and doesn't know how to tell the truth or doesn't care about facts, that's almost baked into the cake, even amongst his supporters. But the idea that lawmakers are going along with it very seriously, not flippantly, but seriously going along with it, I think gives it a lot of credit to people who are tuning into Fox News, maybe who are disaffected voters and think, well, if they're saying it, surely it must be true, because no one seems to be fact-checking this, on some of the right-wing media airwaves. So I think it's actually incredibly dangerous what Steve Scalise and Chuck Grassley and many other Republicans, by the way, are doing, in some ways worse than Trump saying it in the first place.